Good afternoon, everybody. This is Mark Wright, State Representative for District 77, Chair of our House Republican Delegation. I'm here today with Commissioner Tim Temple to talk about a number of bills that have passed the House this week. Did a lot of work on this issue. I can tell you the members of our delegation, and I'm quite confident the Senate too, know that this is really the number one issue for legislators this year. We've heard a lot of people in the campaign and way before that we absolutely need to do some things to make Louisiana better in insurance issues. So that's why we wanted to talk a little bit about the bills we had and what to look forward to. And we really appreciate you joining us. Let me start by introducing Commissioner Temple briefly and let him talk a little bit about what's been going on. They say leadership is when somebody runs to the problem. And I can absolutely tell you that Commissioner Temple has run to the problem here in Louisiana, and we appreciate it. He just got elected this fall and has been delving in with us as legislators on issues, and we really appreciate his leadership. So thanks so much for joining us. And, feel free if you want to talk a little about yourself first and then, where you are, and then we can get into the issues.
Sure. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you and your delegation members today. And I think, Representative, I think most everybody knows I grew up in this industry. There's a lot of detractors from it that say that, that's a bad thing. They call it fox guarding the hen house and everything else. But I actually think that this is a benefit, not just to me, but in the seat that I'm now sitting in, because insurance is complex. A lot of times we just view it simply as it's a premium, it's an expense, it's a cost, but we don't get into the why we need it and how it benefits us. And it is complex, and I'm in a pretty good position to understand the complexities. And I think that's what's going to help me be successful bringing solutions. As you said, this is the number one industry. Every poll I've ever seen, whenever I hear people talk, not even to me, other people come up in other conversations, insurance is the number one crisis because it doesn't just impact us as an individual, but it impacts us if we're a business owner. It impacts us if we're an employee. It's everywhere. It's not just your homeowners. It's not just your auto. It's everything today. And that's why I think that there's a lot of energy and focus on trying to do better for the state.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. Appreciate you saying it that way. I very much agree with the idea that, experience in this matter goes a very long way. And, when we elect good people like you, we know we can trust that experience will be used for the right reasons. And, insurance, I know it's complex, partly because I've had trouble understanding it and been here about 6 years and have had some experience with insurance claims and hurricanes and such in the past as well. And so that leads us obviously to the problem itself. I think everybody who's engaged it, and certainly you do, but I'd like you to tell us about it, know this is not just one fix all. I think occasionally you see people who think one bill, one idea is going to fix it all. It's not the case. So we do have a lot of bills running both on the House side and the Senate side that, we think will chip away at this and create a better market condition in Louisiana. So if you could tell us a little about that, we'd appreciate it.
Yeah, and it's interesting. And again, this is my first experience, being an elected official. And look, as Commissioner of Insurance, my focus is insurance. I don't envy you as a representative or the Senate because you have to be an expert in everything that you support, whether you vote for it or against it. Your constituents look to you to know, to have insight on all of that. So, I don't envy the position that you're in, but I certainly hope to be able to help bring some clarity and understanding as you make decisions like this. It is complex. And again, one of the things I'm finding out through this process is that when, testifying, on behalf of a bill that's part of my package, people keep wanting guarantees. And there are no guarantees. This is all part of it. It's a lot of different pieces of the puzzle. And like we said, it is complex, and there is no single, the silver bullet phrase is often used. People will acknowledge there's no single bullet, but yet on the other side, they want the guarantee that this one bill is going to do something. And so I'm, learning as we go through that process. But, I think that it's important for your delegation members to understand that there are a lot of different pieces of the puzzle. And when they fit together, this whole package is designed to address some of the, I'll say, shortcomings that Louisiana has with regards to some of our unique laws and some of our different regulations that we have in the state to attract business. And I think everybody agrees that we want companies to come to Louisiana. We want them to flourish and do well and be profitable and hire employees and support communities. We're not asking anything different when we encourage and promote the insurance industry. It's the same as we want for oil and gas to be successful, or whether it's solar panel manufacturers or the film industry or anything else that we promote in our state, tourism and fishing and all the sportsman paradise type things that we encourage people to come and do. We want the same thing for the insurance industry. We want them to be here and thrive, because when it operates the way it's supposed to, we as consumers benefit. I think right now a lot of the things that people are maybe focused on is the fact that we did have, it was unprecedented. 4 hurricanes, 12-month period, 12 month and 2 days, 800,000 claims. We haven't had that type of catastrophic event in that short a period of time, that broad. And it stressed the system. It stressed the system to the point where there are a lot of people out there that didn't get the service that they paid for. We had 12 companies go insolvent. Those were 12 companies that were allowed to come into our state, take our premium dollars, and then they weren't there standing beside us when we needed them to pay the claim. Now, fortunately, those claims go into LIGA, Louisiana Insurance Guarantee Association, and they're working through the system. But there are still a lot of people that just had a bad claims experience. And while a lot of the legislation is focused on, identifying inadequacies in our state laws and regulations, we've also got legislation passing through that is addressing the claims experience. And I think one is, we've got Senator Talbot's, I think it's 323, Senate Bill 323, to address the fair claims practice. It's not all just focused on attracting companies. We do have legislation that's also focused on making sure that you and I, as a claimant, are going to be treated fairly, with the intent of getting the claim handled quickly, money in our pocket if we're consumers, so that we can start to rebuild and recover, repair quickly.
Sure. I mean, I think that, really that highlights at least one section of this problem. Obviously we've got property and we've got auto insurance.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I always kind of say about where I live that we've got a double-edged sword. We've got a lot of rivers, and a lot of rivers are great and beautiful, but they also, when it floods, it's a problem. And to a certain extent, living in South Louisiana, particularly with hurricane, we're right in the bullseye of hurricanes in the Gulf, and so it creates issues. On the one hand, it's a beautiful place to be, and for fishing and you name it, oil and gas and other things. But at the same time, we are kind of looked at as a target when it comes to hurricanes. And one of the things that I came to learn in the last couple of years and reading up and trying to understand the issue, I was watching Florida, because they're a very similar environment, obviously right there in the Gulf, much more population, probably a lot wealthier state, and they have had issues too. And one of my understandings is that one of the issues that we're just going to have to wait till some time passes is the nature of reinsurance. And that's a big part of premiums, right? Because you have big companies, international companies, that just have factored in the idea of climate change and the idea of whether you believe it or not. And I got to tell you, I'm skeptical, but extra storms and such are a possibility, and they have to account for that, right? I don't know if you could talk a little bit about that perspective.
Sure. Yeah, and look, and I'm with you. I mean, look, climate's always changing, so I'm not really sure that's the right title for it. But I think that if you look in the near past, it does appear that hurricanes, if we'll just focus on those, they seem to just, I guess, intensify more rapidly than they have historically. So they get stronger faster over a shorter period of time, and they also tend to I guess mature into hurricanes over a shorter duration too. So you've got rapid intensification over a shorter period of time. That's fine. We can't do anything about that, right? That's weather. We can't do it. So what can we focus on? And you're right. Where we are, because of the economy that drives a lot of the state, business or the industry that drives a lot of the state economy, it is oil and gas. And we have a large percentage of our population that lives, in proximity to the coast. So we can't do anything about the weather, but we can do things, and we're addressing it with fortifying, to mitigating our housing stock, to make is more resilient, to hurricanes, to future events. And we've got the fortified roof program, what the legislature has, been very helpful in supporting funding for that. Next year we want to bring a different funding source that comes more from the industry and not directly from state taxpayer, the state taxpayer coffers. But that's next year. But the fortified roofing program is moving forward. We also need to have the conversation about building, I guess we need to have a conversation about increasing our building codes. Texas has very strong building codes as it relates to the counties that are in proximity to the Gulf of Mexico. Florida has done a lot with their building codes. Louisiana, and we have some pretty stringent building codes from what I understand. And I always hear that they're almost the same as fortified. Well, almost still isn't fortified. And so we need to make sure and promote and encourage, whether it's existing homes getting new roofs or new construction, especially along the coast, that we make sure, because look, as a consumer, you're going to benefit. You get that fortified roof, you're going to get a credit. Insurance companies by law have filed credits that you, the consumer, benefit if you put that fortified roof on. So you're going to see your premium go down, as a result of that. But just as important, you get that fortified roof on, it's proven. Your shingles, they stay on the roof, your contents stay dry. As a consumer, that's what you want. You want your stuff to stay, to not be damaged. And that's really the biggest benefit. That means you get back in your home quicker. The community starts to recover faster, and Louisiana is better off with regards to that too. So it's more than just your individual home. You certainly benefit from it, but there's a bigger picture too that we need to have conversations around.
No, absolutely. In fact, and I'll add, this week we passed a bill that extends that program for a period of time. I know this is for the Republican House delegation. The House Republican delegation, but my colleague on the Democratic side actually did the bill, and we all supported it because it's a good program. And as you mentioned, it's one of the few that we know there will be a benefit when it comes to premiums. So.
It's a direct benefit and immediate to the consumer. Once they get that certification that the roof is fortified, they will see a reduction on their, with their insurance company. And if I could, Rep, and I didn't finish up and address your question about the reinsurance component too.
Sorry. Yep,
and look, I traveled to London last December, and we had some members. Senator Talbot was part of that trip, and we met with. We had 4 solid days of meetings, and they were packed from morning to evening of just reinsurers, reinsurance markets, underwriters, reinsurance brokers, all the stakeholders over there. And 2 consistent messages we heard from them was that, one, and this isn't the message, but, they're in a position where they get to see exposure all over the globe. And more particular, they get to see all the various states, how they interact and what they do. And they sit and they can see Texas does this well, Mississippi does that well, North Carolina. They get to see everything. And they get to see where litigation comes from. They get to see where it spikes, and they get to see where states treat it better or worse. And what we heard consistently from them is Louisiana is not a state that they want to do business in because of excessive litigation. It's a simple fact. Yep. You can like it, you can not like it, you can accept the message, you can deny the message, but the fact is the people that we depend on from a reinsurance level, their perception is Louisiana is not a place they want to do business. So if we want them to do business, we have to address it. And that's what the legislation is doing. The other thing, and I know it's not popular, and I'm very appreciative of the support from the House last night's vote on the 3-year rule. Yeah. I understand that's a tough one. It's an emotional vote. And I heard a lot of testimony last night on the floor about, well, what about the short term? Well, I take the position that we've been too focused on the short term. And that's what's part of why we are where we are today. We need to look at the long term. And there is going to be, some short-term pain for, up to that 5%. If your home is one of the, if an insurance company starting January of next year decides to take their 5% and your home is one of them, I get it. There's going to be, for that individual or that family, but we also have to identify that it's designed to create a more competitive market so that, if that individual only was getting insurance because of the 3-year rule, well, we got to look at why. Why is that home unattractive? Is it because their roof is aged out? Is it because it's in a geographic location that is higher risk? We need to address that, and then we can create solutions for that. but it shouldn't be just this forced insurance. You have to come in, you have to offer something there. If we want to create a forced program like that, that needs to be taken on by the state, not by private industry. That's, as a free market, proponent, that's my belief, and that's what I'm trying to create in Louisiana.
No, and look, I hear you loud and clear. I remember I was kind of a new homeowner after Katrina, and we had only had homeowners insurance for the first year. Despite the fact we were in Covington, north of 12, we didn't have to deal with water and stuff. We ended up getting dropped ourselves, and I didn't know anything about the 3-year rule, quite frankly. I was like, wow, that's interesting. I've always been a free market person, so it did sort of say that's very interesting, and I get it. People want to have that sort of security or whatever, but I think one of the stories that isn't always told is, I mean, we're very much an outlier of this. I mean, both in the United States and
we are
around the globe.
The only one in the country and the only one on the planet.
Yeah, so I think it really fits into exactly what you're saying. I mean, we want a business to serve us in a certain way, and they look around and they see, you're the only one that does that. You're going to force me to do this. It's going to cost more, or we don't want to work there and stuff. I mean, it's a bit of a what's the word I'm looking for? Not the best example, but I was just sort of thinking it through, like with other businesses and stuff. And I was like, if you have lawn care or something like that, like
it's not business friendly.
Yeah, if we were going to say you've got to cut these other houses at the same time that you cut mine, or something like that, you could see people kind of why, So at the end of the day, it is a hard to vote, but it's something we had to do for sure, and we appreciate your leadership on that. We talked a little bit about legal environment. Obviously, that is a big part of this debate. And I'm going to tie in something you said earlier. When we did some tort reform, quote unquote, a few years ago in the last term, there were some unfortunate predictions about it's going to change things overnight and set up expectations that never should have been there. It's very much a long-running issue that we'll have to deal with. But there are certainly parts of our legal environment that are a problem, and from an insurance perspective. And again, if we want them to come here and do things, we've got to figure out a way to kind of make it look like other states, right? So we did a few bills this week that are addressing that, and obviously some are coming over on the Senate. So I'll let you share your thoughts on those.
Yeah, and look, again, and that's another, I think the lines are drawn pretty hard in the sand. You stand on one side or another on that. And auto insurance is again, that's homeowners kind of takes all the air out of the room, if you will. But auto is right there behind it, or right there beside it, if you will. And it is something that we need to address, and we need to address it at the same time. We've got some legislation that's going through, direct action, that came off the House floor last night, Representative McFarland's bill.
Yes.
I know there's a companion bill, I guess that's what you call it, working that will work its way from the Senate over. And then collateral source. And again, those are two, we're talking about outliers. Where is Louisiana an outlier in our law? Those are two that have been identified consistently for years. People say we've been fighting this for 10, 15 years. Okay, well, that's pretty telling to me. And then we've got, and we can talk about this one too, is the prescription period. Louisiana has a 1-year prescription. My understanding is we're one of a handful, if not one of 1 or 2 or 3 states perhaps, that have a 1-year prescription. I understand, and again, if we're talking about where we're an outlier, we have to, I don't want to be hypocritical and say, oh, we got to change all these things, but not this one. So we have to at least talk about it in the room. And, I am supportive of going from a 1-year to 2-year prescription, but not just by itself. It has to be part of the package of all these other things we're doing. And I think that the 1-year prescription has served the state and the consumers well as it currently stands as a backstop against all these other laws that aren't, that don't promote adequate equity, in the system. And, the example, 1 year, just 1 year by itself is good because it helps, I guess, limit damages, phantom damages as a result of the collateral source and direct action, things like that. So if we're successful changing collateral source, and if we're successful changing direct action, well, then we ought to be open-minded enough to say, well, then let's also look at changing the prescription period from 1 to 2 years. Again, any one bill by itself does not do anything. It's all part of the package. And again, it goes back to well, what's my guarantee? And I understand, again, I'm not the one voting. I'm the one asking you to vote, and you have to go back to your constituents. But I also have to report to my statewide constituent base. And so it's got to be, we've got to look at, what's the term, holistic. We've got to look at all of this holistically. And the argument tends to just want to pick at each one individual. And I know that's part of the process. But that's why we just got to stay on message. It's all about each package together. But again, if we, the collateral source, the direct action, there's some transparency bills as it relates to litigation funding.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a incredibly huge business. I think it was like 13 billion a couple of years ago. I'm sure it's grown since then. And again, this is all about bringing transparency, and we need that. What is sunshine is the
Disinfectant.
the best disinfectant there is, and that works on both sides.
No, I tell you, I remember very much, my experience is very much tied to what we did last term, early in the term, and I was still a fairly young legislator at the time, but, we all develop our contacts at home that are constituents that we trust, and, I have a very good friend, we go to church together, who's a plaintiff's attorney, and I remember he told me, he's like, listen, I know there's other stuff y'all going to deal with, but he's like, that 2-year would be helpful, and so I just asked him a bit about it, and he just said, for some of the bigger firms that are doing a lot of claims, it's a different ball game. But for somebody like him, he said to try to settle before 1 year, you feel like you have to file the suit. And he said, if we had 2 years, I might be able to settle some things and stuff like that. And I certainly get the counter argument from some defense attorneys, which is essentially there's a little concern that if you wait 2 years and you don't hear anything, and next thing you know, you're dealing with stuff, that's an issue, right? So. It clearly is part of the solution. I think that's the theme of our conversation today, for sure.
Yeah.
So now we've passed a number of bills addressing all the different spots in the House. We have a number of bills coming from the Senate that recently passed that body. We'll clearly, on the House side, we'll vote on the Senate bills that have passed the Senate, and then our bills that passed this week will go to the Senate side. At some point, I know there'll be some sort of negotiating, and how do we get into, and this is where the sausage is made for people that aren't aware. We'll have to kind of think through what things look like. Just looking ahead, obviously we'll be relying on your leadership to help us, and I'm sure the Speaker and the Senate President will as well. We're going to want to at least some point mold all these together, right? And to ultimately have a good faith effort to say, listen, this is what we think will solve the problem, and then we wait a few years at least to see what the results are, right?
Well, look, it's insurance, so it's probabilities. And I like to say that the probability of these bills together, packaged, passing, the probability of that creating a more attractive marketplace is high, and that probability is based upon conversations, research. Looking at other states, looking to see what works, what doesn't work. I mean, the probability is high. The probability of this crisis getting worse if we do nothing is higher.
Yeah, right.
So it gets back to that, there is no guarantee, but this is, this, and people, your members have heard me say when I've gone to, testify at the table, this isn't a hope, it's not a wish, and it's not a dream. This is a plan. It's a package of bills designed after taking input from a lot of different stakeholders that have all agreed that we're in a crisis, for the most part have agreed this is what we need to do to move forward, to create this competitive environment in the state. And again, that competition, that's what will drive downward pressure on premiums. We can't mandate it, we can't legislate it. Insurance companies, especially being, if you're a capitalist, you understand that you get to pick and choose where you deploy your capital. And if our state is not one that's attractive, they're not going to deploy it here, which means it's supply and demand. The less supply and the higher the demand, the higher the price. I mean, it's I hate to say it's as easy as economics, but it's numbers.
Very much so.
And so that's why I'm stressing that we've, in the naysayers, if you will, and this is one thing I'm still learning through this process, that people, members like yourself, you'll come with a bill, and it's designed to address the unaffordable insurance environment that we're in today. But then the detractors from that will talk about, well, you're taking away someone's ability to litigate, or you're making it harder for them to litigate, or all these, those are all on the backside. where they don't address the front side, which is that people are to the point where they can't even afford the very product that the other side is saying that they're going to have to need to go litigate. What about the fact that you need the product at the beginning of the day? So look, and as part, as Commissioner of Insurance, I'm also charged with consumer protection. So I cannot sit there and say, oh, just make it real easy for the insurance company at the expense of the consumer. And that's what I get accused of a lot. And I understand that's politics and that's the nature of it. But I do take that charge very seriously. At the end of the day, if a consumer is buying a product that doesn't provide any protection, well, then that's a problem too. And that's one that again, I'm balancing that. I have to make sure that it's a product that they can afford, but also gives them a product that they can use.
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. I remember I was in one of the committees this week that we were debating one of the bills, and somebody mentioned the fact that we had passed some bills a couple of years ago and there wasn't an effect, and we talked about some of the high expectations, but
well, and if I can too, that they referenced they were guaranteed 25% rate decreases. Well, the thing that they're not coming through finishing their statement is saying that 25% was tied to a bill that passed House and Senate and was vetoed by the Democratic governor.
That's right. No, that's right.
Even if it passed, I still think the 25% was not. I mean, I don't know how anyone could ever give a percentage, because it's just not. It doesn't work that way. But their argument is, we passed tort reform in 2020. We were told 25% rate decrease. Premiums have only gone up, but they don't finish the thought with, oh yeah, by the way, the bill that statement was tied to was vetoed.
Absolutely. And I mean, the other thing I think people tend to forget, I mean, well, they may not want to forget, they may purposely forget, is that what happened between the time we did some of those bills and now, which is COVID. We had dollars printed literally, from a printing press in the Federal Reserve, and we had all these things.
Less cars on the road. I mean, everything. I mean, there was the courts weren't able to implement these changes that were passed. I mean, yeah. And look, I don't believe the argument that, well, you just give it more time and it will take care of itself. I like to equate, it's like, if you want to get in shape, you go to the gym every day. You don't just go once. Right. And it comes to legislation. We don't just pass something one year and just hope and wait to see if it gets better. You have to continuously refine and tweak and improve. Legislation that's passed this year, next year, there may be things that we need to go back and unintended consequences. We need to look and see. You got to continuously refine, because the other side of that coin is that, guess what? All the other states in America, those ones we're competing with for that capital, their legislatures are meeting every year, and they're making changes every year. And so if we just do something in just a bubble and just say, well, maybe one day it will take place. Well, Texas is their of course, they only meet every other year,
yeah,
but they get a lot done.
Yeah, they do.
But they're meeting. Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, everybody's continuously meeting, or constantly every session. And they're tweaking. And so if we don't continuously do that too, then we just get further and further behind.
No, amen. So let's just kind of fast forward a little bit as we come to an end. Obviously, we hope we get through this session, we get our bills passed. And I assume you then begin to look at running your office, because I know right now you focused on working with us. And then moving forward, any thoughts about, jumping into managing the whole thing and where you want to go in the next year or so?
Yeah, I'm very blessed in the fact that I work with about 222, coworkers that know their jobs well. I inherited a department, right, when I became Commissioner of Insurance. And those men and women, I can tell you this, and having worked with them now for, over 2 months, they are dedicated. They understand the role that the Department of Insurance plays and how insurance impacts our state, either positively or negatively, depending on where we are. I've got some really good deputy commissioners over there that are excited and enthused to this kind of new path, if you will, going forward. And it does allow me to focus more on the legislative efforts over here, and not so much the day-to-day. But it's still my job at the end of the day. It still falls on me if something slips up over there. But I do feel very comfortable and confident that there's some good people over there that I can rely on.
Absolutely. No, definitely. I agree with you, especially given the people I've met and worked with. So thanks. Well, We'll kind of call it an end here. Let me just kind of wrap up by saying we had a number of great bills by House authors passed this week. Everybody from Speaker Pro Tem Mike Johnson, Representative Michael Mellarine, Emily Chenevert, Gabe Furman, Jack Farland. I'm sure I'm missing some other names, but there was a bunch that are going to be moving on to the Senate. We will have some Senate bills in committee in the next week or so, and certainly vote on those. I would say contact your legislator or anybody that you feel can help exert some influence. We want to pass these bills. We don't want to see them die at the finish line. So please support your House Republicans. Please support the whole legislature in general. And we thank you for your attention. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.